In the spotlight today is a video on the Walters World's channel titled The Five Most Unfriendly Countries I've Ever Visited. But I encourage you to go check it out. Mark Walters has some interesting insights into five countries he found very unfriendly. Of course, my emphasis is on the Asia Pacific region, so I have one observation and a comment to make about one of the countries he listed.
And today what I want to talk about are, well, I'm going to answer one of your questions. And that is, Mark, what are the most unfriendly places you've visited? Well, there's been a few over the years. I know people like to make comments on our videos saying, Mark, you always say that these people are friendly. You say every place has got friendly people. I'm like, yeah, every time you can find some friendly people. But overall, if you watch my videos, you'll notice sometimes I don't mention the people at all. Probably a good sign that the people weren't that friendly. And so,
okay, I agree with Mark there. If you can't say anything good, then don't say anything at all. So there are certain countries I've visited that you probably won't find a lot of videos on my channel. And that's, like Mark, that's probably the reason why, because it just doesn't help the discussion for me to focus on the negative. So now, the
second place where the people weren't so friendly was when we were in China. And what's funny, when we were in China, we'd have like 1, 2, or 3 people around us. Everyone was super friendly and kind and fun, and it was really a great time. But once we got a big group of people, then everybody started fighting over seats in the restaurant or the dragon fruit at the grocery, no joke. Or when you're going into a place of people whacking you with things. Like, it was just like not a very friendly experience. And I think part of it is because there's just so many people that it's people are worried they're not going to get stuff. And therefore, I've got to get on this elevator, be damned everyone else. So that's one thing where I didn't really have a very friendly experience when I was there, but it was a cool experience. But I mean, I'd go back to all these places I'm talking about, but I'm just saying, you wanted to know.
Okay. He brings up some interesting points because obviously as a world traveler, he has a broader view of society, different societies. And what he described, I would not describe as unfriendly. As you guys know from my Jamaican in China blog and from this channel, my experience in China has been really up there. It's one of the friendliest places I've ever been to. When I went the first time, people were following me around, asking me to take pictures. I would tell a story that I'm sitting in a restaurant and people are gawking at me and, just staring because they haven't seen a Jamaican in China before. So people are always saying hello, hello, hello to get my attention. So for me, it's friendly. What he described is something that I've described as well. There is a phrase in Putonghua, in Mandarin, that's ren san ren hai, which is, and those of you who speak Mandarin will forgive my mispronunciation. It means people mountain, people sea. And it refers to a situation where there's a lot of people. And I experienced that the first time I went to China. I took a subway train from the airport, I believe, into Shanghai. And when I came out of the station on Shanghai, I've never seen that before. Just the sea of people, a mountain of people, a sea of people is unlike anything if you're not prepared for it. Especially coming from an island like Saipan, where there's only 48 to 50,000 people. So if you want to get on a bus in China, and I experience this everywhere, you have to push. There is no queuing, there's no waiting. You have to push to get on the bus, or else you'll be standing there for hours. If you want to get your produce weighed in the supermarket, you have to be very aggressive and assertive in getting your broccoli on the scale before the next person. So there is a pace of life and what I refer to as a simple survival strategy, as he mentions in his video, that, there's so many people that you have to be very aggressive in how you do things. But it's not unfriendliness. No one is singling you out to be mean to you, as that's how I would define unfriendliness. People are not looking over your head and taking care of somebody else online and overlooking you. That's unfriendliness. People are not, getting up and moving when you come to or sit, on a train. That's unfriendly. So I don't, I wouldn't put China as unfriendly simply because what I see is simply a survival survival strategy that people have. Now, a couple other things come to mind is that there will be people, as he mentions, there will be people in every country who probably are not keen on foreigners. As I told a friend of mine, when he was having a similar experience. You walk into a room at a party and half the room likes you and comes up to you and wants to interact. The other half of the room is filled with people who don't like you. Focus on the half that likes you. As the saying goes, go where you're appreciated. If 50% of the room, if half the room is coming up to you, wanting to take a picture, wanting to be your friend, going on, asking if they can go on dates with you, then why on earth would I focus on the negatives? I'm sure it's happened. In fact, if I really think about certain situations, I'm sure I can come up with a negative spin on it, but I don't focus on those. And those are not the ones that stand out, particularly since my first impression of China was very good. So everything after that, just confirmed my bias. So I have had a different experience, and like I said, it sounds like the same experience, but I don't view that as being unfriendly. Some people may judge it as being rude in certain cases. Some people um, may judge it as hostile because of the bumping and the pushing, but in my opinion, it's not really. But something else to think about is there's always a context as to why people act the way they do and why you may be treated the way you are. And I'll give you a couple examples. There's a video circulating on YouTube showing a train in China, and there are maybe a dozen people in this train car, and someone falls over, obviously distressed, sick in some way, maybe they fainted, they fall over, and everyone else in the train immediately bolts and breaks out and heads out the door the next time that the train doors open. And people would look at that, and without knowing the context of that behavior, they may say, "Wow, China is a very unfriendly place. They didn't even help the guy. It's real unfriendly." But they should know in context that there were and still are in China a lot of scams where elderly women and men will fall to the ground, feigning illness, feigning sickness, feigning injury, and someone will come over to them and offer to help. And then that person the person on the ground, the elderly person, will blame that person for pushing them down. So when the authorities come, they blame that person who's standing there, and it makes sense. Officer, this is the person who pushed me down, and people have been made to pay, exorbitant funds and compensation. So again, it's just a survival mechanism that people don't want to be there when the authorities arrive because they might be blamed for that person's misfortune. I'll give you another context. When I went to Singapore, generally a friendly place. However, when I went to a hostel, because I always stay in hostels, I don't stay in fancy hotels, the hostel owner was obviously not pleased to see me. And she, was giving me dirty looks, no smiles, no nothing. But she checked me in, and ultimately, over the course of the couple of days that I was staying there, we started talking, and she told me that in Singapore at that time, there were fellows from Africa who came and were creating a bad reputation for themselves by doing drugs, by selling drugs and whatever else. So she, not having any other experience with foreigners, was making a blanket judgment and put me in that same category, and even told me after she got to know me, got to know I'm Jamaican, got to know, I'm not a drug dealer, even told me that to some degree I have to compensate and make up for the bad reputation that people have of the Africans. And I understand that. It's just like any place else. Your first impression of a person, more so in other countries that maybe and I'm reluctant to use the word, not that sophisticated in terms of seeing foreigners, will make judgments on based on their first impression of that group, whatever group they put that foreigner in, and that's how stereotypes develop. That's how you have um, the American Karen stereotype. That's how you have the loud American stereotype. So there's that. And as you know, I'm fond of the Asia Pacific region, but even on Saipan, the friendliest place in the world, if you're not aware of the context, you could be treated, you could find yourself treated in an unfriendly way. And I'll give you an example. I was in Sun Leader supermarket on Saipan, Sun Leader in Garapan, and in front of me was a fellow who I believe was off the ship. And by off the ship, we mean there are some military pre-positioning ships on off the coast of Saipan, and every few days, guys and girls will come off the ship, and you recognize them. You know who's a stranger. So he's standing in front of me. He's paying for his products, and the cashier, Chinese woman, is giving him mean looks. And just you can tell by body language, you can tell by the look on her face, you can tell by the eyes, you can tell by the way she's, doing the transaction that she's not happy with that fellow. And he picks up on it and he says, I get the feeling you don't want me here. What's the problem? I've come here before. I pay my money and what it is. And, she doesn't answer him, but he leaves. And I wanted to tell him, after I paid for my stuff, I wanted to go out and tell him what was going on because he came off the ship, or was just visiting. He didn't know that for the last week before, there was a bird flu scare. So every day on the news, there people were worried about bird flu. And of course, when you're on a little island in the Pacific, bird flu is brought in by the strangers, by the foreigners, whether it's the tourists, whether it's cruise ships, whether it's the guys and girls off the ship. So he didn't realize that, but I immediately saw that that's what was going on because he was coughing while he was online. Paying for his stuff, he was coughing, and every time he coughed, I could see the woman get visibly upset. So there's context. There's what's going on in the community, what's going on in society, what stereotypes you're up against that may affect how people treat you, and that will happen just about everywhere. So, very interesting video. If you're curious to see what his 4 other countries are that he found unfriendly, then you can check that out, and I'll see you in the next video.